All right, now we're ready. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to managing DPAs for SOPPA by using the ISPA SDPC database. So right there, you're probably turned off by the title already, but yet this is something you have to do, or somebody's told you this is something you have to do. So we'll get into it real quick. This is just one of many resources for you to use for managing data privacy agreements. That's what the DPA stands for the SOPPA legislation, or SOPPA. I always say it both ways just so that I get the audience on my side. But you guys can fight in the chat room if you want later on. But the database that we're going to be talking about today, so this is actually kind of like the implementation part of managing database or managing your data privacy agreements. And so we'll go through the menus, go through everything. This is kind of the 1 hour fire hose of everything. I'll also share with you all the resources that we have so that when you walk away here with more questions than answers, you'll have resources to check out. I see a lot of familiar faces and names. Well, not a lot of faces, but some names in the group today. So good to see you all, hear you all, talk to you all, chat with you all, whatever we're doing here today. My name is Chris Worley. I am the Director of Technology Services for the Learning Technology Center. Prior to coming on with the Learning Technology Center, I was the tech coordinator for Williamsville School District, just outside of Springfield, for 21 years, and did a little bit of everything technology-wise, curriculum-wise, working with teachers, working with applications, hardware, devices, phones, cable, all those types of things. So I always say that I did everything that you all have done, but you're doing it through COVID, and you're also doing it with SOPPA. So let me start a poll here as I introduce the resources, and then we'll get into, once we get into get the poll done, we'll jump into the how to use this stuff. So the resources are available, and I'll put in the chat again the links to the slideshow and also to the resources. So this resources page is really the place to start everything. You'll notice that I have it bookmarked here. I have an open tab as well. It's just kind of the place to do everything. So you've got navigation for the stuff that we're going to talk about today. And if you haven't requested your account, click on Join ISPA. For those of you that it will work, we'll get you an account set up. Also, let's just go to that page. So the navigation's over here on the left. Over on the right is all of the dates for upcoming events. And I need to schedule out some more All Things SOPPA so that we can continue those conversations. All Things SOPPA is a opportunity for people to come and ask questions, really kind of wherever you're at, kind of like an office hours type of thing. So be sure to join those conversations, or you can also find those under this YouTube playlist for All Things SOPPA. All those recordings for the last 12, 13 weeks are available. There's a question and answer session that kind of towards the end of the event or of the sessions that whatever questions people are asking, we'll answer those. And then the slide deck is a continuous slide deck. So it's the same slide deck I've used for the last 13 weeks. Ultimately, you've got the content for this week, and then towards the end, there's archives of all the different tips and suggestions and different things that are available there. Also, using the ISPA SDPC database YouTube playlist. This was actually, and I'll click into this because I really want you to see what's available here. There are, I think, ultimately 23 videos in this playlist. The recordings from this session on April 26th or there, so I may have said something different then, but it should be the same session we're doing today. So, and then last week we actually talked about the Illinois NDPA, the actual data privacy agreement template that can be used for getting data privacy agreements and holding that originating and subscribing context of what we'll talk about today. So check out that webinar when we get done, and it should explain a little bit more about the data privacy agreement that we have in place for you to use. That was developed by the Illinois Association of School Boards and the Illinois Council of School Attorneys SOPPA working group. They came up with that Illinois NDPA agreement. That agreement is also available on the resources page. So just like all the other resources are available, also that Illinois NDPA agreement is there. And we'll kind of look a little bit at this later, mainly just from a standpoint of how it relates to the database and what it looks like when you're looking at the database and what you'll see with the agreement. But ultimately, every district needs to have this vetted, or every district has to have data privacy agreements with vendors. That's what SOPPA really boils down to, is protecting your data by having these data privacy agreements with vendors that lay out all these terms and legalese and all that kind of stuff. The idea of using this template is that from a state of Illinois level, school districts, if they're all using the same agreement, then the portion of it in here that is called Exhibit E, which you'll hear me refer to Exhibit E several times, is a general offer of terms. So the vendor would come in and say, we're putting this agreement together with school district A. So this is a DPA between the provider and school district A on this date. And we as the provider say that you can piggyback or subscribe to this agreement. So the vendor would fill out the top part, the bottom part is filled out by the school district, and then the email that's supplied here will receive an email based on the school district subscribing to that agreement. So they'll get this particular page of the 25-page agreement, and that's the subscribing process. And that's very simplistic. Check out that other Illinois NDPA agreement video to learn more about that. So, and we'll talk a little bit about the subscribing process as we go through the database stuff. So it looks like 70% of you, 23 of you of the 33 that responded have been to a session. Great. Have you visited the resources? Great. If you haven't, you've got the link now in the chat, so maybe you can change. You could have changed your answer. Do you have an SB or ISPA SDPC database account? You may not right now, but you will within a few minutes if you choose to do that. And then looks like we have a lot more technology people than administration, and there's probably some combination of technology and administration and curriculum and teacher all wrapped in one, if I know my Illinois school districts well. I guess I could have shared that as I was talking about that, so you can kind of scroll through there and see what that's all about. All right. So the first thing, and the slideshow is gonna be there for you to look at on your own. Again, I'll put that in the slide deck or in the chat just for people that may have joined recently, because Zoom doesn't have a persistent chat. So what I want to do is really navigate through the website. The slides are there for you to look at and refer to later. The first thing, if you don't have an account, so for the 10 people that don't necessarily have an account, there's two ways to get an account. One is to initially join, and you would be the first one to join as your district. The second one is to have somebody at your district add you as another user. So if you go to join ISPA and you click on select a district and you find your district in here, that means that you don't have an account, or your district hasn't requested an account yet, so you can do that. Ultimately, you can add other users that may be more responsible for doing the management later on if you want to, but if you want to follow along or do anything after today, you can request an account in the system. If you don't see your name here, you can also look here to see if it is there. So if I look for AC Central, I'll see that it's already taken. So I would talk to whoever that person was to get me an account. So there's two things that may happen. One is you won't be in either list. So reach out to me and ask for or that your district be listed in the big drop down, or this person has left the district or doesn't remember what's going on or signed it up for it and didn't realize that what they were doing, and you want to change that, and you can reach out to me for that as well, and I'll get that straightened out. So request an account, and if you've done that, what I'll need to do on my end is approve those, and I will approve the handful that are there. All right, so the handful being 2, but all right, so that's step number 1, request the account. And then I'm just going to go here and show you kind of, I'm going to stop sharing the poll, close that out. All right, this is the Illinois Student Privacy Alliance homepage. This is a specific homepage for Illinois. The LTC has paid the membership fee for the state of Illinois. We're an alliance member for the Student Data Privacy Consortium, so there's no need to pay any money. The membership fees are not necessary for you to get access to this database. Everything you need can be done for free through this process. And you'll notice just some statistics. I don't know why I should say stats, because that's easier to say than statistics. I just can't say it, even if I slow down. So there's 577 districts that have, and that includes school districts, private schools, co-ops, special ed co-ops, vocational schools, alternative schools, ROEs have requested accounts. Not everybody's put in any data privacy agreements or anything at this point, but they have requested an account. So that's a good step to doing this. And again, I should have said this at the very beginning, this is not the only way to do managing of agreements. It's just a way that we found through the Student Data Privacy Consortium, through what other states were doing to manage their agreements, because this has been a requirement in California for 5 or 6 years. States like Connecticut and New Hampshire and other states are managing their agreements in this database system as well. The other number to look at is the 4,100 or almost 4,200 agreements in the database. That means that those agreements are either an individual agreement that a district has with a vendor, and that could be something that's been in place for a couple years and you already had that, and so you just uploaded that to the database, or it can be that relationship. Make sure that can be that relationship between the originating district getting an agreement and then the subscribing. So of those 4,100, about 300 of them, I believe, are originating agreements. The other 3,700, and my math isn't right as I was saying that, but the other 3,800 agreements, 3,900 agreements are subscribing. So on top of that, they're a combination of subscribing or standalone. I would say most of them are subscribing agreements, and I'm going to show you that relationship in the database and how that's managed and how it's going to be easier for you. So what you would do when you get your account, you're going to log in. And to log in, let me just back up a second here, slow down. Again, you can bookmark the login page and go directly to it. The only reason I say to go to the ISPA website is because you'll see that there's other events and you'll see any new resources showing up here as well. But the navigation's here as well. So I can log in. So you could bookmark this page. All right, so once you log in, again, you'll see these are national stats. See how I did that? And you can see that there's different, there's 31 different states participating. I've been told that Iowa is coming into an alliance, so there'll be 32 states that are involved with this database, with the NDPA agreement, as well as just having those resources and people to bounce ideas off of, just like you guys have access to all this database that's a shared database for Illinois. I also, as the alliance lead, have access to the other states' alliance leads to be able to ask questions and help with ideas on management and all those types of things. So I'm gonna kind of work from right to left. This is the areas that you'll be in least, and the left you'll be in the most. So when you first get your account, you can look at account management and just look at your information in here and see if there's anything that needs to be updated. This email, subscribe to emails, comes from the Student Data Privacy Consortium. So if you decide that you don't need to see those emails, you can unsubscribe to those as well. That doesn't affect anything else within the system as far as emails go, but the Student Data Privacy Consortium does occasionally send out updates on meetings and stuff that are happening at the national level and different things. So just something for you to check out. You can also, if you're the district admin of the system, you can also look at the settings in here and make changes to those if you need to. Particularly the logo will be something that will show up in different places. And then later on, we're going to talk about the custom resource listing, that these two things will affect what shows up on that page. So those are the main things as far as changing information. Manage district users. This is where you can add somebody that's going to manage the agreements. They're not necessarily the person that's going to sign the agreements. They're just the one that's going to manage them. So they would have the full ability to do pretty much everything we're going to talk about today. You can also add a user that would be, say, your superintendent or an assistant superintendent or a principal or whoever you're going to designate to be that signer of the agreements. Could be a curriculum person, could be a technology person, but that doesn't have to be the person that manages the agreements. It can be the superintendent that the only reason they're going to go in here is to sign off on agreements. And we'll talk about that when we get to the exhibitee signing process. But just know that you can add a user in here anytime you want. That would only sign exhibitees, and so they're not going to be doing the management, not going to see all the different options for managing your agreements. Manage workflow. So if you go back into, I'm going to jump back into the presentation real quick. I shouldn't have closed that. Control-Shift-T. Control-Shift-T. Control-Shift-T will open up your tabs that you closed. There's your little technology nugget for today. So if you look in the presentation, it talks about managing your progress workflow. Basically, you have the ability to add different progresses through your workflow of going from you need an agreement to you have an agreement. And this is not required, but it does get to be beneficial, and you'll see why it's beneficial if you have this set up and if you want if you're going to be getting originating agreements. If you're not getting originating agreements, then this workflow process isn't necessary. These steps, you should be able to cut and paste the text from this into your workflow process. So when you're looking at the workflow, you should be able to cut and paste the stuff from this table. So the workflow step, request sent, step name, step order number 1, and just cut and paste if you can highlight properly. Cut and paste that into your steps. And you'll now notice that I have 2 steps that are step 1, so I'm going to delete one of them. So you have the ability to manage that and move things up and down by changing the order and different things in that process. And I'll show you where that's going to be important later on in the process, but this is where you can set that up. And there are videos for managing your work progress or your progress workflow in the YouTube playlist. That's just another menu choice that's the same as when you're adding a district user. So, all right, so that's account management. Moving on to tools, there's really a couple different things to think about here. The main thing being that anything that you put into this database, ultimately you can get out. So the investment of putting this stuff into the database, ultimately you can export it out into Excel and have a spreadsheet of the fields that you're filling out. The documents themselves, you probably had to have them on your computer at some level, or you can download them individually as needed later on for that process. So it doesn't actually export the attachments, but we'll have access to all that stuff if you need to pull the data out. The other important thing, this is kind of like taking the cake out of the oven. This is the end result of what you can do with this database. So I mentioned the edit district information, customize the page title, and also the description for this website. So when I click on this website, this is the listing of my, and when I say my, the LTC's agreements, and this is just a test thing, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense in this particular listing, but basically it shows the application names, it'll show logos if those are available with the resource, the company name, that the agreement is in place. It'll actually show the documents that are available here. So this textbook tracking, if I click on this, it'll show me that that is an agreement between East Peoria and Companion Corporation. But it's for Textbook Tracker, and what I've done is I've subscribed to the East Peoria agreement, and so this should be my Exhibit E, that is vendor signed at the top and signed by me at the bottom. This document this one-page document was sent to Textbook Tracker to this email address so that I could be subscribed to that agreement. So I have an agreement that's based on East Peoria's agreement by subscribing through the process of the Exhibit E signing process. And as I said a couple times, we'll show you how that works. So ultimately what's going to happen is this is going to be filled with your agreements, whether they are uploading a one-off agreement that doesn't have any subscribing or originating stuff to it, or it can be an originating agreement. So you're the first district to get an agreement with a vendor, or you can be a subscribing district where you're signing off on the Exhibit E to piggyback or subscribe to that full agreement that was entered into by the originating. All right, so this can be either linked to your website or embedded into your website, but ultimately this custom PT here is the page title, and then the custom page description that's available on that account information page is what you would be updating and be able to add, and then your logo shows up there as well. Currently, you can't change colors or anything like that, but that may be coming down the road. But ultimately, you're probably just going to create a link from your web page that's going to point to this address, and that's found under Tools and Custom Resource Listing. Some schools are choosing to use this digital resource request form because what this is a way for teachers or curriculum people or technology people to say, hey, this is a resource that we have, so put this in our database, and then we'll go through the process of getting an agreement for that, whether it's a subscribing or an originating agreement. Other people are just using something like Google Forms or Office Forms for collecting those resources and knowing what resources you're using. But this is an option as well. And so that's also under Tools and Digital Resource Request Form. These other tools, rarely ever going to use, and so I'm not really going to talk about them. Your resources, again, not a lot that you're going to do in this area except for view statewide new requests. So your resources, view statewide new requests, and I'm just going to go over here and check my database and see if anybody else has requested an account so that you can, sorry. Had that on another screen and thought it was going to be easy to do, and I clicked the wrong button and logged out. All right, there's a couple. Gives me a chance to take a breath too. All right, so your resources, view statewide new requests. So when I talked about the progress workflow, this is really the area where you're going to see that in action. So if I sort by this table, I will see different information within this database that shows me progress being made towards an agreement. So if I'm going to go in and try to get an agreement with no red ink, like the first thing I would want to do is make sure nobody else is already trying to get an originating agreement. So it looks like Durand School District has sent an agreement on 4/23. So they're updating their progress workflow. So what you can do as a district that is really just looking to subscribe, and this is, let's say piggyback agreements, you can subscribe to the progress. So this subscribe button is subscribing to the progress of Durand School District to get an agreement with no red ink. So if I click on subscribe, the next time Durand comes in and makes an update to their progress workflow, then I will get an email saying that whatever it is, that they have an agreement, that they're posting that agreement in the database, and so you'll be able to subscribe to it. Other different things in the database. So Dunlap has some different thing, response received from the provider on 5/10. So they're going in and putting those things in there. There may be more information that goes along with that. So just depending on what their workflow is, you may get emails from different people on a regular basis. Other times you won't. The other thing you can do is search by a particular app. So if you can see that all these people have added these as a request, but they haven't done anything with the workflow. So it's not necessary to subscribe to anybody that doesn't have workflow here. And it's not necessary to subscribe to anybody in this process as well. This is just Maybe you are really interested in No Red Ink and you want to know when they get an agreement, so you could subscribe to that. But it's not necessary, it's not needed. There's other ways you can come back and check on a regular basis to see if there's an agreement, but that's just a way to get that email when they update. And if they update, they don't have to update it either. So that's the other thing, is you could be waiting on an email that's not going to come because that school district didn't update their workflow. So it's the good thing about this database is that it's collaborative. We have access to everybody's information in the sense of they can update it and they can change things and they can share their progress and it can be time effective. The bad thing is that school districts can update it and make it what they want, and sometimes they may skip a step or not do it, and so we can't really hold people accountable for that, and nor should we. But it's just a benefit of the database that if people are using the work progress, then there can be benefits for other school districts as well. That's really the only thing you're going to use under there for the most part. And then as we come to your district agreements, this is where you're going to be working a majority of the time. So this manage your district agreements and manage agreements is pretty much going to be what's on your public facing website. So if you see information that's here that doesn't have this progress field, so the new requests won't show up on your website, the public facing, but they show up in here so that you can manage the workflow. So if I change my workflow and somebody was subscribed to this, then they would, so not only would my district receive those emails for this person, but also anybody that is subscribed to that workflow progress under requests would receive that email. But all these others that have agreements and are active will show up on my website, and that's what was showing up before. And within manage agreements, you can change agreements. So if you've started an agreement, specifically one that doesn't have an agreement with it, you could change the agreement type and then add the originating agreement or subscribing agreement as needed. And we'll go through that process a little bit here in a second. You can also edit information that's associated with these agreements. So if I come down here and I edit other information, this is the information that is also, anything in green is public. So that's going to show up on your website if you make these selections. So pre-K, and I think pre-K is brand new. I think somebody just added that. So you can add pre-K, you can select all, you can also, and this is for how it's used in your district, not necessarily that it could be used this way, but just how it's used in your district. And date approved, date expired, you can update those information. Really, the actual data privacy agreement should not expire. There is a 3-year wording in there that has to do with the subscribing and originating process, but the actual data privacy agreement should not expire. So you can extend that out to 3 years just to have a date in there, or make it longer if you want to, but it's there for you to use. Requester email. This stuff is just extra stuff that you can utilize in your district if you want to organize it that way. And then once you save the information, it'll go back and populate your particular agreement that you were editing that other information. Another thing you can do is, and this, all these things are happening when you're adding an agreement or subscribing to an agreement, but you can also come back and do this stuff at a later time. So like right now, these data elements are part of my agreement, so I could delete those if I wanted to, or I can add other elements if I need to add other elements. So edit or add, there are two different choices there. If you want to add them, you select on add. One of the enhancements that's coming at some point, probably over the summer, will be that this list will be in the same list order that it is on Exhibit B of the data privacy agreement. So you move those items over. If it was working right now, you would move those agreement or those items over into that and save that information, and then that would show up on your resource listing. All right. So that's manage agreements. So anything that you have an agreement with or a new request will show up in that list. If you click on add new agreement, you don't necessarily have to have a contract to add an agreement. This is basically like a new request that you don't have an agreement at this point. So you could put that in your database just to have it in there as a placeholder for when you do have an agreement, whether that is a originating, a subscribing, or a standalone agreement. And then these options are pretty much going to be the same for if you change an agreement type or if you're adding a brand new agreement. And so ultimately, the only time that you're really going to use this is if you're an originating district that's getting that agreement for the first time with a vendor. The subscribing process is going to be done in another way that's easier and more straightforward and not as complicated. And just a little bit about originating. This is more a ask more than it is a requirement, but there's a difference between a national standard agreement with Exhibit and a national vendor specific agreement with Exhibit. Both of them are originating agreements. Both of them have an Exhibit E that's in place for districts to subscribe to that. The difference is that the vendor specific has the Exhibit H, which is there for vendors and school districts to make exceptions to everything that's A through G or NDPA through Exhibit G. Ultimately, we don't want a lot of Exhibit H stuff because the whole subscribing and effectiveness and time management of the whole thing falls apart at that point. So the NDPA, the Exhibit G, we want to try to keep it as close to that as possible because we've already had our lawyers vet that. We've already had the legal team say that that's okay to use that agreement. When things start branching off into the Exhibit H, it gets to the point where somebody in the technology department or curriculum department or an administrator doesn't know what to do with that. Like I don't, as a computer person, I don't understand. I don't know what that stuff means. At that point, you got to go back to your lawyer and say, hey, is this stuff okay that I include this or is it not? And that's the same whether it's for an originating district or for a subscribing district. So you need to look at the Exhibit H during that process, and I'll make sure I note that again later. But by putting it in as an originating district as a vendor specific, that just is another note to those subscribing districts to say, hey, there's an Exhibit H here. Make sure you look at it, and just as another note for them to look at. But ideally, we want to stay as close to the Illinois NDPA as we can. The subscribing process, ultimately, what you're going to do is basically find the originating district that had an agreement, take that Exhibit E that they have with that agreement and sign it and then upload it. So that would be the process if we use this page to do that. We're not going to do that. So but that's what these two things are. And then this is if you enter into an agreement, but the vendor doesn't want to use the Exhibitee, which I'm not really sure why anybody would do that. So really, but they could use the entire Illinois NDPA agreement and not sign the Exhibitee, and then just require everybody else to be on their own as well. And then any one-off agreements can be uploaded through this process, other type of agreement. So I'm going to just take you through the screen grabs are all, the screenshots are all in the slideshow. The Illinois version 1.0A is the latest version of the agreement. So you would select that. You would select the particular application that you're using, and then choose the dates that are on your document. Date expired, again, you can choose that and make that at least 3 years out. You can make it longer if you want. If you're using, well, this is an originating agreement, so you want to take that email address that is on Exhibit E and put it into this box that will allow the computer, the technology to, when you sign an Exhibit E, it will put your information at the bottom of that Exhibit E document and then email it to this email address that's listed on the page. As an originating district, you are uploading the full document here. So this is where, and you won't see my screen, I don't think, but this is just the Finder or the Windows File Explorer, where you would find your full document. So you would find that full document. And I'm going to do this just because, again, you won't see this, but I won't be able to go to the next page without doing it. Again, there's some naming conventions that are in the slideshow as well to help with naming. Using the application name and the district name is very helpful when you're saving that, so that you know that that's the file naming convention. Again, you can fill this information out as you're going through the process or going back and editing that information later. I'm going to go ahead and click on continue, see if it airs out on me. No. All right. So the second thing as an originating district that you need to do is say that you're uploading your Exhibit E, and then choose the one page that's pulled out of the full document that's the Exhibit E that's signed at the top and then blank at the bottom, and you're going to upload that into the system. So once you do that, that'll be available to districts to piggyback onto that agreement. Then you would enter in your data elements. Those are going to show up on your website as well. You can fill this information out. You can put a purpose in here. Again, you can go back and change this information at any point. And so now that agreement is going to be in there. So for AAA math, that agreement is in my database and available for other districts to subscribe to. So now if I go to manage agreements and I look at AAA math, here's the Illinois NDPA agreement that I uploaded, and here's the Exhibit E that should be blank at the bottom and available for other districts to sign on to. I'm going to delete this so that it doesn't appear as an originating agreement. So I can delete anything that's in here in my manage agreements as well. And I know that's fast, and I know, so if you do have questions about any of this, there's videos, there's resources, and you at the very first slide and the last slide of the presentation, there's a way to get on my calendar and to ask specific questions. So I'm going to skip overview all state DPAs, but I'll come back to it in a second. So that was uploading an agreement, whether it's a originating agreement, or really the other one would be if it's a one-off agreement. The subscribing process for subscribing to an exhibitee, or basically signing the exhibitee document, is done through your district agreements, auto exhibitee creator. Also notice the other menu choice here, which is view prepared exhibitees, because I'm going to mention that as we go here. So this page is really where you're probably going to start with that list of applications that you have for your district. Come into the auto exhibitee creator, and this process will allow you to, or this page will allow you to search for a particular application. So we used no red ink earlier as an option. So there is a data privacy agreement already in place for no red ink, and it just went into effect of May 4th. So that is already there. Those other requests are there as well, but this is where you're going to see that there's actually an originating agreement. As a subscribing school, it's still your responsibility to look at the full agreement before you click on create exhibitee. Ultimately, you can create exhibitees for all these different applications. So I could go through and I could click on create exhibitee, create exhibitee, create exhibitee, and that's going to sign that originating agreement, put your name at the bottom, and send an email to each vendor, and you would have a data privacy agreement with every vendor. Even if you don't use their application, you could have a data privacy agreement with them. Ultimately, the problem with that is that you haven't looked at the full agreement to know what you're subscribing to. Ultimately, so if we look at these, just look at this page generically before we go back to red ink, no red ink. We're going to see vendor specific. We're going to see vendor specific. Slow down. We're going to see Illinois NDPA version 10A, and then you may also see Illinois NDPA version 1. And this is where going back and watching that other thing, or coming on Tuesdays to ask questions and learn more about the Illinois NDPA will be helpful. But all this information is going to be here. There should also be Exhibit E. So this particular one looks like there may be an issue with how it was uploaded or whatever, because it doesn't have the Exhibit E there to actually sign on to. So we'll have to go back and look at that. If you come across things like that, let me know, and I will take a look at them and work with the particular school district that uploaded that, so that every other district can subscribe to that without questioning those types of things. So as a subscribing school, you click on the NDPA agreement. So this is the full agreement. So this one was entered in between Township District 214 and No Red Ink. I can scroll down through here. It should have the information here. It's got check marks for Exhibit G, which that should always be checked because that's the Illinois portion. The Exhibit H is that portion that is extra stuff that makes it vendor specific. And then Exhibit E means that other districts can subscribe to it. So as I scroll down through here and I get to Exhibit E, well, I'll just stop real quick on A. A is the description of services. This is how the software is used. Exhibit B is the data elements that are exchanged between the school district and the vendor. Exhibit C is just the definitions of the things, of the terms. Exhibit D is how the data is going to be handled if you're no longer in a relationship with that particular vendor. And then the Exhibit E should be signed by the vendor and an email provided and blank at the bottom. And then Exhibit G should be pretty much standard, shouldn't be any changes. And then if we look at the Exhibit H, this is where you can see that vendors or lawyers would have to be involved, because you're going to have to make sure that your vendor is going to sign on to what these changes are and how they're made and all those types of things. And that's really unfortunate that this is the first time I'm looking at this particular application or this particular agreement. And it's just really unfortunate that there's that much stuff in there, because not only does it give leverage to other vendors, it also gives leverage to it just makes it complicated for every district that's subscribing to that to know what to do and have to take that back to a lawyer and all that kind of stuff. So you may choose to subscribe to that, you may not. The Exhibit E document should be that one-page agreement. So you can look at that, and then this is where you have the option to do a couple different things. One is to create the Exhibit E. So what that does is whoever is logged into this system, when you create Exhibit E, it puts your information at the bottom of that Exhibit E document. So who is ever logged in and they click the blue button, green button, whatever color that is to you, it will put your information on the bottom. If you do prepared Exhibit E, that's where that option comes in for a superintendent, a business official, somebody else that's going to be signing those agreements. So you, as the manager of the agreements, you're not necessarily going to be the one signing them, but you're preparing them for somebody else to sign. So you would click on this button. Ultimately, all that does is puts them in this menu choice. And so I myself, if I clicked on sign Exhibit E, it would sign it with my name still. But if the person that's supposed to sign them is logged in, they'll see this choice and they'll be able to sign it, and they'll put them in their information. So they don't have to look at this page to sign it and look through all these other applications that are available. They just look at view prepared Exhibit E's, and then they sign it. It's going to put their information on it, whoever's logged in. So regardless of if it's the data manager or if it's the agreement manager or if it's the superintendent, whoever clicks on that sign Exhibit E, it's going to sign it with their name. So just be aware that this button does exactly what this button does, but the idea being that the person that's signing them comes to the view prepared place, and they click on the sign, and it'll put their information at the bottom of that agreement. Once they do that and they click on sign Exhibit E, it will be put into the custom resource listing that will appear on your website and will look just exactly like this. So the textbook tracker, I subscribed in Exhibit E. I'm the one that clicked on the bottom button or on the sign Exhibit E button. So my name is at the bottom of that agreement. So that is where whoever's supposed to sign the agreements will be able to sign them. All right. Just a few other navigation things and we'll wrap up right about on time. And if I will try to, let me finish doing this and then I'll stop the recording, and then we'll be able to have a few minutes for question and answers if you want to do that. You can always come on Tuesdays and do that as well. So just another looking at view all state DPAs. This is another way to see originating agreements and subscribing agreements and standalone agreements. So if you scroll all the way to the bottom of this, you'll see why this gets a little bit more complicated. And didn't think it was that long. Why is it showing so many? All right. There's 41. I don't remember what the number was before. It was like 4186 or something like that. So there's been 5 agreements uploaded since we started this process. So this page can get rather lengthy. This includes all DPAs, whether they're subscribing or originating or standalone. But you'll see over here, it's got the relationship of the original agreement and the Exhibitee that are here. You can search by particular application or applications. So if I look at no red ink, you can see that there's several that are here. If I click on the originator and move that to the top, I can see that that's the originating agreement. And then, so that means that all these other ones are the subscribing agreements with those. If I clicked on any one of these agreements, I should see the whatever it was, Township School District 214 agreement. And then if I click on the bottom one, I should see the Exhibitee that's been signed by that school district. So if I'm looking for originating agreements, I could come in here and I could see what other people are signing on to as well. But now with the Auto Exhibitee Creator, this is really the way that you can see what agreements have an originating agreement, and they should be the only one there, or there may be multiples depending on whether it was the old agreement or the new agreement, whether there was some district got an Exhibit H or didn't get an Exhibit H. But once one district gets an Exhibit H, it's probably going to be hard to go back to not having an Exhibit H. So that's just something we're going to have to deal with this process. I do believe that is the menu. So again, these are recorded, they're available. The previous one is already up on the website in the playlist, the how-tos playlist, if you need access to that. If you do have questions, feel free to, and I'll look through the questions here and we'll just stick around and answer any questions that you have. And I'm going to